Hello guys, and welcome to this new tutorial here. So today we will build this particle moving along spline effect. So you can see it here. This is basically, let me zoom in here a little bit. Those particles will move along the spline. We will do that with MOPs. Big shout out, of course, great tools. You can see the particles will move along the spline here and also get like a little masking effect or displacement effect with a touch of color. So you can see the particles will also affect the spline, and yeah, you can later control that with an attribute and change the color, for example. And yes, we will build that together. So let me just get the player here, and I will show you a quick breakdown of the setup, and then we will build it. So here again, simple rendering. And I will just show you it quickly, so you can later, for example, remap the colors or the masking, the touch of color to your like. So I find that pretty powerful, and of course you can then use it to amplify it on products, on maybe some steel frames, etc, etc. So let's go back here, let's go into the geolines, and you can also do that with multiple approaches in what way you will create the lines. So I did it here with a popnet, or you can do it with volume trails, so that's, for example, fully up to you. So quick rundown: circle, mountain, convert line, then the particle simulation, trailing, time shifting to freeze it, scattering the particles, then the move along spline, the masking, the displacement, and then we are basically finished. So pretty cute little setup here. Let me just disable that. And we will build that up later, so I will leave the shading network for now, but we can build that up later. Okay, now we will begin here. Let me just hide. Cool. We'll begin with a simple circle here. So circle create. And what I want to do, I want to basically displace it a little bit. So for here, I think I scaled the circle a little bit down. Yes. And now the circle is scaled down, but I think we will need a little bit more resolution here. So you can dial up the divisions here. Maybe let's go for 228, and now you can see we've got a much higher resolution here to work with, basically. That's pretty good. We got a circle, so let's keep that organized here. Let's make a null. Let's go for input PTS for points, and what we then can do, we can displace it and convert it before. So we got a mountain here node, so let's place down a mountain node. Let's place it here. Let's change the orientation here to ZX, and now you can play with the mountain node here. Let's go for, maybe you can also do subtract or add or multiply, 0 centered, min max, negative. So I think that's the new mountain node from Houdini 19. It's now much more bigger in the options. You can play with the element size here. Let's play with that a little bit. You You can also animate it. That's also pretty cool. So if you dial up the pulse duration, it will get much slower, for example. If you dial it down to 1, it will be much faster, so you can play with that. But for now we will just need a still here. So then I will convert it to a line, basically. Convert, finished. We basically converted the outline, and now we can start to place down a popnet. So this is like version number 1. You can also do that with, for example, volume trails. We will look to that later. Cool. So we got a popnet here, and now when we play that back, you can see we will seeding particles here on our line, but we got no movement. We seed all the time, and now let's introduce some movement and seeding on the first frame. So dive inside with double click, and now let's get some room here. And now what we can do, let's go on the source. Let me just show you it first. Pretty simple. Source, a pop wop, and we're basically finished. So let's dive inside here. We can scatter onto the surface, yes, but we will disable the constant activation and a constant birth rate. And what I want to do is I want to leave the impulse activation on 1, and then, for example, scatter 150 particles. But I want to also do that only on the first frame, so we will type into impulse activation a little expression, $FF equals 1. So the current frame needs to equals 1, then we will activate our impulse activation. On any other frame we will deactivate it. So we will basically source the particles only once. Cool. After that I want to place down a pop-up, and we can dive in here, and maybe it's familiar to you. Now we are basically in a visual VEX network here, and that's cool because we can use, for example, a curl noise and pipe that into the velocity. Now let's play those here, and you can see we'll get those really cool swirly particles influenced by this curl noise. And what I want to do is to get the frequency. I want to make that time dependent, and we can really easily do that. Get the time here, pipe that into frequency, but now we'll get that, and then we will get a really harsh frequency, and the particles will basically go like crazy. Let's demonstrate that with a higher amount here. So we will get those, and then maybe it's cool for a specific effect, I think, for maybe till frame 48. But then they will really go crazy. And what we will do, we will just basically multiply our time with a constant. So multiply constant, pipe that in between here, and now, for example, we can go like times 0.1, and then you will get this broad beginning, and then they will swirl more and more and more. So I think that's pretty cool. Let's have a look how they will look at a trail factor. You can get here DOP import IO if you want to basically isolate your imported stuff here, .NET, and then we want to import our particles on the pop object. So using object, fetch geometry, and then pop object. Then a trail node. Let's place that down. Trail length $FN, and then polygons and disable the close rows here, and now you can see we've got our swirling particles here. Looking pretty good. Now what you also can do, you can get rid of the zero offset here, so you can play a little bit with the offset. You can play with the roughness. Let's dial that down a little bit. Amplitude, let's dial that up. Of course, that's now like a little R&D stage, so you can play with that all time long. And if you find something that you like, you can use, of course, this frame. Okay, we got a little bit of intersection there. Let's go for another offset. Let's go to the negative direction. That's looking pretty cool. So I will use that for now. Now what I want to do, we got basically our trails, so let's place a null here. So out lines, let's call it lines. I already did it here, let's just delete this and this. Out lines. And what I want to do, I want to make a time shift. I just want to freeze those, so get rid of the channel here, and now they are basically freezed. So we can scrub the timeline, but they will not simulate or basically play back the animation or the simulation, because it's now freezed of the time shift, and you can jump here to any frame that you like, for example, and freeze that specific frame. Cool. Then what we can do, or the next step will be, we got our scatter here and wrangle, so we will use that. So time shift. Then let's go for another null here. Let's go for the in movement. We can get a scatter node here. So we now scattered some points here. Those will need an ID attribute, so we can go with an attribute wrangle, or you can go with an enumerate. An attribute wrangle would be at f at ID, or better an integer equals at ptnum. So now you can see in the geometry spreadsheet, hide all attributes ID. Every point will now have an ID attribute, or you can just use, for example, the enumerate on points and just type in here ID, and you will basically get the same. So now we got that. We then need maybe a resample. Let's have a look here. Yeah, we'll need a resample. So let's get a resample here and resample them a little bit. Let's go on subdivision curves to make them a little bit smoother. Of course, you can make a smooth node, for example, after that. And now we will place down a MOPs node. The MOPs move along spline. Move along spline here. Cool. So, oh yeah, of course, I forgot that. I got a website. You can follow me on Twitter, on Behance, Instagram, and I got a Patreon for every month exclusive tutorials, so you can get in there if you want. And of course MOPs, motion operators for Houdini. Check them out, motionoperators.com. You can download them, you can play with them, really nice and useful nodes for Houdini, and especially specific for motion design. Cool. So this is the MOPs move along spline. We'll need here our points basically. and here our spline. And now you can see they are all distributed on one line. What we will need to do, we will need to set the curve select node on distribute. So now they are distributed across our lines. And whoops. And then what you can do, you can, for example, the attached method, you can distribute it, you can place it by an attribute, or nearest point is, I think, the default. So now if you scrub the timeline, nothing will happen, because what you need to do is to go on animate, and then you can get here the goal here, and the randomize function, and the random seed. So that's all really nice, and what you can do, you can just, for example, $T, type in here $T, and now you can see the particles moving, but way too fast for this kind of setup. So you can add like a multiply by 0.1, for example. Let's go for 0.5 maybe. Yeah, that looks good. And then we got here our particles. So now we got the particles here moving, looking really good. The next step would be placing down mask from geometry and a polyframe. So mask from geometry. Now we got that. We'll connect that to our line. So we got the points on our reference side and the line on our geometry side. Reference group type would be points. And now let's get the mask and let's scale it down. Cool. Let's scale it down a little bit more, maybe something like that. And now you can see the points will create masking attribute on our lines, and we can use that. For example, we can place down a polyframe, and let's get the normal to of course you can use the standard one, you can play with that, of course. You can use like the tangent, or you can use the bitangent. I will use the bitangent for now. And we will need a WOP, point WOP. And we will call that displace with attribute, so with our attribute. And that's pretty cool, because now we got our mask attribute, that one here, sitting on our lines, and we can import it here. So bind will import an attribute. Let's call it mask, and let's get a displace along normal. The position, let's pipe that into amount and that into position out, and of course it's way too high, so we need to scale that here a little bit. 0.01, nope. And now you can see we've scaled basically our line, or displaced that in a given direction, the normal direction, where the points will float along or travel along basically. To better visualize that, you can merge that here, and let's get a copy the points. To quickly visualize that, let's get a sphere primitive. The primitive, let's scale that down here, but I think it's way too big. Yes, 0.01. So now you can better see that. Let's get that here, and now you can better see it. So we got our particles or points moving along the spline and leaving that displaced effect. So that's cool. For now, what we also can do currently, let's delete that visualizer quickly. The resolution is, I think, a little bit too low, so you can either bump the resolution up in the render stage, or you can just bump it up here a little bit. Nice. Cool. So we got that. We got our lines, we got our particles. Another thing what you can do, you can actually blur the mask a little bit. Mask, and let's go for proximity. Yeah, just like, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 blurring iterations. Let's go for 1. Cool. Let's make a null here. So we got our outlines. Let's call it final. The final, oh my god. Final. And the out points final. Let's call it PTS merge, because we will merge that in another geo level. Looking pretty cool. Another thing what you can do, what is also pretty cool, you can go for like little, you can place a trail here to get like multiple points moving, or you can also again close like the rows and get, okay, you will get this weird effect here because you will source multiple. You can go for that, or what you also can do, you can compute the velocity here and use that for shading, for example. So that's also pretty cool. Okay, we got now 2 here. We got the outlines final and the out PTS merge. So let's dive up. Let's delete that and delete that, so you will see every step. Cool. And let's delete that too, and that too, and that too. So we just got our geometry container here. We will place down another geometry container. Let me just look at the time. Okay, easy. Geo PTS. Let's import them back. Object merge. And voila. So now we got our points merged. Nice, that's looking good. That's looking also good, and now we can basically render that. Before we render, we'll need to set 2 things. First of all, on the lines, go to the strands, render object as strands, cylinder. Here you can tessellate them, for example, and global scale. And here we'll do particles, and let's just dial them down for now, so we can see that later. We'll need a camera, for example. Then we will need a ROP network and a material network. RS mat and RS out. Nice. So redshift, let's place down a redshift node here. Let's go for that. Globals, this is on. Go for brute force and P3. Nice. We got the camera here, and we'll need basically 2 maybe material containers. One for the lines and the other one for the points. So point material, line material, and let's go for the camera quickly. Let's zoom here out and get, I don't know, maybe a nice frame here. Let's do, let's rename that here quickly. Camera, maybe close up, I don't know, 90mm 01. Let's dive back in here. Let's adjust the focal length to 90mm. Then we can also adjust our focus point here. Copy that into our focus distance here. And let's get a bokeh image F. Nice. So we got that, and we need a light, of course, so RS light. Let's go for disk. RS light, maybe side. Just for a simple light setup here. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Free. Spread 0.9 maybe. And get that further back. Let's go for 0.05. And now first of all let's check the lines. So start redshift here. Starting up redshift. Oh, and we need wait, let me just get my camera here. And what I want to do basically, let's get back our 90mm and our thing here quickly. Is the right one? Yes. Okay. Cool. Let's get back that one here, and I want another. Yeah, we can go maybe for the thumbnail. Cool. So let's start that here, and now you can already, of course, see we need to apply our materials. So let's go for the line material, render the lines and the points. And now let's start again redshift. And now of course you can already see it's way too bright, so let's bring down the exposure to, I don't know, maybe -3 would be fine. And let's also activate the points and deactivate the lines to see the scale. Okay, maybe we can scale it a little bit down. Of course you can also scale, make a random scale for example. But let's just currently keep that scale uniform. Nice, so we got our lines. Maybe we can make the lines a little bit bigger. Cool. And then, for example, you can use here the color user data. Whoops, wrong note. Color user data. Let's go for the mask. Pipe that quickly into the surface, and now you can see we've got our mask here. We can ramp that and pipe that, for example, in diffuse color. And let's go for, let's refresh that here, and let's go for quickly white to red. And now you can see the effect with the particles. And now, for example, I used in the little preview, I used, for example, I think aluminium, pipe that into reflectivity and make it more rough. I don't know, 0.35 would be nice. And then we can do another close up. Let's go for 90, and let's go for 6 by 7. 6 by 7.5. Let's zoom in here. Let's get also refresh that. And let's get close here. And let's get a focal, the focus distance. Yeah, there's something like here, that's looking good. Or we can move it like a little bit further to get those in focus. Yes, nice. And let's go for minus 0.5 maybe. That should be fine, cool. And now of course you can go for maybe for a similar material on your spheres or on a completely different material, and of course that's always up to you. 0.35, let's desaturate that a little bit. And yes, now you can make a little, for example, camera movement, and so on, and render it out. So I hope you liked that tutorial, and if you want, you can get in touch with me if you need help, etc. Leave it down in the comments, and I will see you in the next course, in the next Patreon video, or on the next YouTube video. So thank you all for watching, stay safe, and have a great day.